before I do start this video, make sure to use my TCG player affiliate down below if you're looking for any of these singles that I talk about today. Also, this channel is sponsored by Arcane Fortress. If you're looking for the best deck boxes around, make sure to use my link down below in the description to check them out. One other way you can support the channel is by becoming a patron. There are some great benefits of being a patron to the channel, such as giveaways, deck advice, and more when you do join. For today's patron shout out, I would like to thank Clinton Syme for being a patron. I can't thank you enough for your support.
The world you play, I don't want to set the world on fire.
Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on Pub Stomp MTG, and in this video I'm going to be upgrading the Science Precon deck for Fallout. This is the last deck that I will be upgrading. Later on I will do some deck techs for specific commanders because there's a lot of commanders within the set and I'm excited to talk about them. And so Dr. Madison Lee is the front facing commander. So for blue, red, and a white, it's a legendary creature, human scientist. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you get a energy counter. You can tap, pay energy counter, target creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample and haste until end of turn. You may tap her, pay 3 energy counters to draw a card, or you can tap her to pay 5 energy counters to return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. So this is basically a toolbox commander that you could utilize. Honestly, I feel like the front facing commander and the other commander that I will talk about are good options, so I feel like either one can't really lead you astray. But for now, I feel like Dr. Madison Lee, again being a toolbox commander, can be very powerful, giving trample and haste to all your creatures for that first energy counter, drawing cards, and also artifact recursion is pretty incredible, especially being a 3-mana commander. Another fantastic option is Liberty Prime Recharge, the secondary commander of the deck, and I just love this because this is just a giant mecha for 2. Red, white, and blue, let's be real, he's a total patriot. If you haven't played the games, check it out. He's totally a... I don't know if the right word is like a supremacist, like a American supremacist, but really that's what he is. But he does have Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, being a legendary artifact creature robot, with being an 8/8 body. Whenever he does attack or block, you sacrifice it unless you pay 2 energy counters. He also does have the ability of paying 2, tapping it, sacrifice an artifact, you get 2 energy counters, and draw a card. So I feel like this is just more fun if anything else. You obviously can't play this, but I feel like maybe the front-facing commander is a little better if you're going for more of a toolbox strategy with energy counters. I still feel like this is very fun because obviously Liberty Prime is a mecha and I absolutely am in love with it. I might have to do a separate deck tech video of it, but for now I do feel like the other option is probably a little better in this deck. And so with that said, let's dive into the 99. Let's talk about some of the cards that are great in the deck. And there are a lot of cards that focus on artifacts and energy. Of course there will be, but let's first focus on one that has an attack trigger like Synth Eradicator. So for 2 and a red, it does have haste, and when it does attack, exile the top card of your library. You may get 2 energy counters. If you don't, you may play that card this turn. So you either have the option of getting energy counters or getting a free card every time you do attack. You do also have that tap ability by paying 3 energy counters. Synth Eradicator deals 3 damage to any target, so it acts as removal, counts as card draw, semi-card draw, but it's very versatile and a lot's going on with it. I love it for this deck. Another really good artifact creature I do want to point out is Sentry Bot. So for 4 and a white, as a 2/5 body, it does have flash. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature attacking you. When it does enter the battlefield, you'll get an energy counter for each creature attacking you, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 3 energy counters. If you do, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So I do like this. If a lot of creatures are attacking us, we can get a huge amount of energy counters, and later on we can buff up our creatures. So overall, pretty decent. Next up on the list is Robobrain Warmind. For 3 and a blue, its power is equal to the number of cards in your hand, and when it does enter the battlefield, you get an amount of energy counters equal to the number of artifact creatures you control. And whenever it does attack, you may pay 3 energy counters. If you do, you draw a card. So I do like this because if you are in a grindier game, if you're not getting a lot of value out of your cards, Robobrain could definitely get you that value by getting a card draw each combat. Another big brain robot I do want to highlight is Curie Emergent Intelligence. So this is a legendary creature for 1 and a blue. When it deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its base power. You could also pay 1 and a blue, exile another non-token artifact creature you control, Curie becomes a copy of the exiled creature, except it has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw cards equal to its base power. So in a weird way, this kind of reminds me of like a reverse mutate, in a way where you want Curie to become a copy of a different creature on the battlefield. So that way, if that creature has a big power on the battlefield, you can swing in and draw a lot of cards. And to be quite honest, I actually think this commander is really good depending on what kind of artifact creatures you are running in your deck. But I do want to highlight some utility cards like Electro Siphon and Bottle Cap Blast. These are just great utility cards. Electro Siphon acts as a counter spell, and you get an amount of energy counters equal to the mana value that you do counter. And the more artifacts you do have on the battlefield, Bottle Cap Blast will basically almost be like a red mana in most cases. Deal 5 damage and potentially get a lot of treasure, at most probably 4 treasure tokens tapped on the battlefield. Yeah, this is pretty great. Speaking of which, I do want to mention Automated Assembly Line. This is extremely good because of course if you have a lot of energy lying around, you can make robots on the battlefield left and right. Also, it does have the ability whenever one or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get an energy counter. This does of course have some synergy with Gonti's Aether Heart, mainly because whenever another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you get 2 energy counters. So obviously when you create that 3/3 colorless robot artifact creature token, you are getting 2 additional energy counters with Gonti's Aether Heart. Also, I'll just say here, Gonti Aether's Heart is a great addition to the deck. I won't mention it in the other part of the video where I talk about the upgrades, mainly because I'm talking about it here, but again, a very good upgrade. But I do want to talk about a cool commander I might make a deck tech of in this video, and that's Sean, Father of Synths. So there are many reasons why I do like this commander. I did want to point out that is my dad's name, Sean, so I do have a little attachment there. But this does have a very cool ability whenever you do attack. So when you do attack with any creature, you may create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of target attacking legendary creature you control other than Sean, except it's a not legendary and it's a synth artifact creature in addition to its other type. When Sean leaves the battlefield, exile all synth tokens you control. So in a way, this kind of reminds me of Brutaclad making token copies of a certain thing, but this is very different. I do like the fact that all those tokens that you do make will stay on the battlefield, at least until Sean leaves the battlefield. One of the things that I do like to do in EDH is abuse ETB strategies, and Sean, Father of Synths will do that for you. And I just wish this was in Teamer colors so that I could play Atali Primal Conqueror having that busted ETB effect and copying it all the time. But I won't go into this commander too much because I will be probably making a deck tech of this commander specifically, so stay tuned when this goes live for sure. Now that I've talked about the new cards, now let's go over some of the reprints of the deck. Alright, so I'm here on MTG Goldfish just to look at the deck. There's a lot of fun stuff in here. As you can see, there's a lot of different price swings that will happen just because the follow decks haven't been released yet. But I do want to talk about the reprints. I already talked about some of the new cards, and so let's dive into it. So first of all, we do have Lightning Greaves. This is just a very welcome reprint and with some new art, pretty sweet. There is also Treasure Vault that is also a very welcome reprint. I like how they probably will do a different art on it. Right now it just shows the Dungeons and Dragons art. Mystic Forge is also a very welcome reprint, even though I feel like it kind of fell out of favor because of it getting reprinted a lot. Panharmonicon, also another one that got reprinted a lot, but has some new art. Austere Command is a very good one because it has 2 different modal options of destroying all artifacts, destroy all enchantments, destroy all creatures with mana value 3 or less, or with 4 or less, or 4 or greater. Wake the Past is another really welcome reprint. I mean, it's not very that expensive, but I like it because it has new art and it could return all artifacts from the graveyard to the battlefield. Mechanized Production is a very good reprint in this deck. Could be potentially a win con depending on how much artifacts you do have on the battlefield with the same name. Even though really it's a 96-cent card, it just has great synergy with the deck. And this does bring me to my next point, and that's the fact that there's not a whole lot of reprint equity in this deck. It really focuses on adding new cards in the deck, which honestly I do personally like. I mean, I obviously want to have more reprints, but if that does mean there's more cards to add instead of more reprints, I'm more than happy to see that because I love seeing new cards in the set. Now that I've talked about the new cards and also some of the reprints of the set, I do want to focus on what cards I would add to the deck. And so in this video, usually I will add about 10 cards, maybe more, maybe less, but usually around 10 cards. I did previously mention Gonti's Aether Heart, and of course this is going to be a very welcome addition. Whenever it or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you get 2 energy counters, and you may pay 8 energy counters, exile Gonti's Aether Heart, take an extra turn after this one. That's a good use out of it. I would rather use that to have the artifact enter the battlefield to get more energy counters as an engine, but it's good if you want to get an extra turn regardless. And I will say a lot of the cards that I will talk about in this upgrade are going to be cards from Kaladesh because they focus on energy counters. It was basically the only set that really focused on them. But I did want to point out the best ones that take advantage of your commander's abilities. For example, like Dynavold Tower. So for 3 mana, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get 2 energy counters, and you can tap it to pay 5 energy counters, and it deals 3 damage to target creature or player. So this basically acts for removal, but really it's storing a lot of energy counters for you whenever you're casting an instant or sorcery spell. So that by itself is very good. Another great card in the deck that I do want to point out is Aetherworks Marvel. And so this did get a spike pretty recently because a lot of people realized this would be good in the deck. So for 4 mana, whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get an energy counter. You can tap it to pay 6 energy counters. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast a card from among them without paying its mana cost, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So that by itself is very powerful. If you do have a huge spell that you can cast for free, hey, go for it. Again, in a similar situation like the other card previously, this is just an engine for you to get a lot of energy counters. This gives you energy counters based off of permanents entering the graveyard. But if you do want to get some extra combats, you could use Lightning Runner. For 5 mana, this does have double strike and haste, and whenever it does attack, you get 2 energy counters. Then you may pay 8 energy counters. If you pay untap all creatures you control after this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So honestly, if you get enough energy whenever you do attack with this or many other creatures in your arsenal, you could possibly get infinite combats as long as Lightning Runner survives and all your other creatures survives. If you get enough energy, you could just get unlimited combats to win the game. So this is pretty powerful. Another powerful card I do want to mention is Aether Squall Ancient. So for 5 and 2 blue, it does have flying, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you get 3 energy counters. You can also pay 8 energy counters, return all other creatures to their owner's hand, and you only activate this ability as a sorcery speed option, but I feel like this is very powerful because it acts as a Cyclonic Rift. I mean, this will target your own creatures, but that's completely okay. Honestly, half of the fun of this card is looking at the art. It just absolutely looks breathtaking. I love Leviathans. I love all sorts of big giant creatures, and so seeing this card, it's just breathtaking. So those are all the energy counter cards that I do want to highlight specifically. Again, they all did come from Kaladesh, but I do want to give you a warning if you plan on buying these singles that I talk about as far as the energy counters go. Wizards is planning on making a Modern Horizons 3 commander deck that focuses on energy counters and is in the same color combination in Jeskai colors. Don't mind the Jund colors in that other Precon deck. It's going to be Jeskai colors. But aside from that, many of these cards that I did mention that focus on the energy counters may be reprinted in here. So I know a lot of them, like Gonti's Aether Heart or Aetherworks Marvel, has been going up in price a little bit because of the demand, but it may be reprinted in this commander deck. So just proceed with caution when making this deck and upgrading it. Aside from that, we do have some great artifact synergy in the deck. So Joyra, Weatherlight Captain, and Lost Shield Clockwork Scholar are great card draw outlets. Whenever we're casting an artifact, Joyra will trigger and draw a card. Lost Shield, whenever a creature enters the battlefield, that's an artifact, we will draw a card too. You can also use Thopter Spy Network to get a lot more card advantage. So for 2 and 2 blue, at the beginning of upkeep, if you control an artifact, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and whenever one or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So one, this will provide a lot of options for us. We will make a lot of tokens on the battlefield that we could swarm our opponents with, and we could get some extra value by drawing some cards. Because we will have a lot of artifact creatures on the battlefield, we could take advantage of Organic Extinction. It does have Improvise, so in most scenarios you could possibly pay just 2 white mana for this, and you could destroy all non-artifact creatures. This was also just reprinted in the Murderzak Karlov set, so it is pretty cheap, so that's a very good option in this deck too if you need a board wipe. And lastly, I do want to mention Alibu Ancient Witness. So for 3 red and a white, other artifact creatures you control have haste, and whenever one or more artifact creatures you control attack, Alibu Ancient Witness deals X damage to any target, and use Scry X where the X is the number of tapped artifacts you control. So what's very nice about this attack trigger is the fact that any artifact on the battlefield that you have is tapped, it's going to trigger this more. So for example, if you have a Soul Ring, Arcane Signet tapped, it's going to contribute to that Scry X and deal damage ability to amplify it even further. Plus you can deal damage to any target, so even if you hit it to your opponent's face or your opponent's creatures, it's going to deal a lot of damage the more artifacts you do have on the battlefield. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on upgrading the new science deck. This one is a little original because it does focus on energy counters, and I'm kind of glad to see it happen. Of course, it does have a artifact sub-theme, and it's very cool to see that, especially in Jeskai colors. But let me know down below in the comments, what are your thoughts and opinions about this deck? Is there anything you would add to the deck? I would love to hear your thoughts. And with all that said, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. With that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.